One of the most interesting races people should be on the lookout for is a special election in New York, which will sort of be a litmus test to determine if Democrats or Republicans have an advantage. Talked to the U.S. Education Secretary about this issue a little bit over a week ago, and it seems that he has not changed his tune. He says the Biden administration has yet to decide whether or not they'll be extending the current pause on student loan payments. The president's executive order comes on the 2-year anniversary of George Floyd's death. In light of those new disturbing images coming from Ukraine, Secretary Blinken is calling for a war crimes investigation and also further sanctions. President Biden says starting immediately, veterans will have access to health care coverage for 23 conditions that were previously denied. Today, we'll hear from 2 former advisors to the former Vice President Mike Pence, who will likely give us some more insight about what was going on. Now, Democrats are entertaining one last option that's potentially including a path to citizenship inside of their $3.5 trillion spending plan. People here tell me immigrants played an essential role on the front lines of the pandemic. Although last time around when they voted on a bipartisan commission to investigate the deadly attack, 35 Republicans joined that effort. Only 2 supported yesterday's vote. Good evening. It definitely was. And we know this wasn't the first hearing looking into this topic, but it definitely was one of the most emotional. What is the White House's response to these new accusations, and are you at all concerned that it might taint public view as we go into hearings next week?
Taking Judge Jackson's record wildly out of context.
Senator Warnock on the Senate side talked about voting rights yesterday, staying here through the holidays to get it done, and really pressuring the White House and Senator Manchin to push for maybe a similar carve-out as we saw for the debt ceiling. Do you share that sentiment?
Completely am inspired by and agree with what he said.
What is going to be the message from the president given this crisis?
We have to stand for democracy.
We've been here before. What exactly is being deliberated at this point?
Daily conversations are happening.
Dreamers aren't in the clear just yet. Here on Capitol Hill, some lawmakers say they're unsure Meta can be trusted. Police have increased security and say they're working closely with local law enforcement as well as the Supreme Court police.
Raquel, any details as far as what the president might do and any interactions he might expect to have when he's there in Buffalo tomorrow?
Well, we know that the president is no stranger to grief, so expect to see him consoling and comforting the families. Do you think that there is a path forward in Congress to get the funding needed in order to see this plan through? You're feeling better? I know you had affected recently.
I've recovered and I'm antigen negative.
What's interesting about this situation in particular is this used to be a bipartisan effort, voting rights. I guess, what is your interpretation of what's at play in this moment? Why have we seen such a dramatic switch? Now, it's important to note that the president did file lawsuits in each of those states, and 2 of them have already been dismissed. A CNN poll that was conducted just after the insurrection showed that 3 out of 4 Republicans believe that this election was illegitimate. So that is a tough crowd to try and convince otherwise. And we saw President Biden actually speak directly to those individuals in his inauguration address. Abortion, inflation, and the country's political future are all on the ballot this Tuesday as voters in Florida, New York, and Oklahoma hold their primaries.
We are going to have a really interesting confluence of factors here.
Political analyst Todd Belt says Tuesday's results will indicate how progressive or moderate the Democrat Party is leaning.
There is sort of a struggle over the future of the Democratic Party.
In New York's newly redrawn 12th district, voters will choose between Congressman Jared Nadler
I'm a more principled progressive.
and Congresswoman Karen Maloney, also a self-proclaimed progressive.
Actions speak louder than words.
Both have been in Congress for nearly 3 decades.
Usually don't see 2 heavyweights going like this.
It's unfortunate. What else can you say about it?
Another race to watch, the special election in New York's 19th district. Democrat Pat Ryan is up against Republican Mark Molinaro. Results in the swing district could preview which party is more likely to control the House after this November's midterms.
That buffer that Democrats have right now is only 5 seats, and so it's going to be very close.
And outside of Congress, in Florida, State Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried and former Republican governor turned Democrat Congressman Charlie Crist are duking it out to see who will take on Republican Governor Ron DeSantis.
It will be interesting to see who's going to go up against Ron DeSantis, who's been a very polarizing figure.
Get ready.
Lawmakers on Capitol Hill are preparing to crack down on big tech.
That it's going to affect literally every American.
Illinois Democratic Senator Dick Durbin says the Senate is advancing legislation to prevent big tech companies like Google, Amazon, or Apple from promoting their content over smaller competitors.
Consumers should have a choice.
Competition is a good thing. If not an even playing field, at least have a chance.
Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley is one of 5 Republicans on the committee who voted to push the bill forward.
Congress should have acted years ago.
And he says he'd like to see even more aggressive legislation.
I ultimately think that these monopoly-sized companies ought to be broken up.
The bipartisan bill is just one of several proposals gaining steam on Capitol Hill designed to clamp down on big tech's power. Carl Szabo with Net Choice, which represents companies like Google and Amazon, calls the effort a distraction cooked up by Democrats.
To shift the focus of Americans away from the troubles in the economy to pinning all the blame on business.
Szabo says the federal government already has the needed power
to go after any business that has market power, abuses that market power, and leads to consumer harm.
So far, the Biden administration has not endorsed any specific bills, but is taking steps of its own. This week, the Federal Trade Commission announced plans for new guidelines to stop large companies, especially in the tech industry, from merging into potential monopolies. In Washington, Raquel Martin. The bloody battle for Ukraine is intensifying as Russian forces are ramping up attacks across the country. Since the start of the war, the Office of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights has recorded more than 4,000 civilians have been injured and nearly 2,000 killed. Friday, Ukraine's president said Russian forces are terrorizing Ukrainians. Right now, Zelensky is pleading for more aggressive sanctions against Russian oil to try and deter escalating attacks. He's also warning Putin may ultimately turn to nuclear warfare if the battle drags out, especially after Ukraine successfully sank Russia's Black Sea flagship Thursday.
None of us can take lightly the threat posed.
Thursday, CIA Director William Burns echoed concerns that after setbacks on the ground, Putin could pivot to Russian nuclear weapons.
Given the potential desperation of President Putin and the Russian leadership.
But adds the only current evidence is Putin's verbal threats.
So far, we haven't seen a lot of practical evidence of the kind of deployments.
In response to Zelensky's pleas, this week the Biden administration okayed another $800 million in aid to help Ukraine's military fight back. The package includes an additional 11 Mi-17 helicopters, 500 Javelin missiles, 300 Switchblade drones, and 100 armored Humvees. In Washington, Raquel Martin.